drink the whole thing? No, I just gave it to her. And God said to me at that moment, she wasn't ready for that. You shouldn't have given her that. And I was like, oh, okay. So he only gives us what we can handle. God's not a microwave or a vending machine. Just keep that in mind. So we can't just put in our requests, put in money, bribe him. It doesn't work like that. Be very careful if you make a vow. Also, don't make a vow, because that has some ties to it too. But with that in mind, let's look at the prodigal son. So Luke 15:11-12. Then he said, a certain man had 2 sons. The younger of them inappropriately, keep that word in mind, said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that falls to me. And so he divided the estate between them. So this hit me really hard now that I'm a parent, because this son, this prodigal son, by saying that to his dad, it says inappropriately, because by him saying that to his dad, he's basically saying, Dad, I wish you were dead. I don't care about you because I want what I want. Basically, he wanted what was going to be his later in life, but he couldn't wait for it. So he's like, I want what I want, give it to me now, and I wish you were dead. So just like the father in the story, God will sometimes let us have what we want, the way we want it, the way we think it's going to look. But he does that to help us learn. Because little did this prodigal son guy know, he was about to go through some things. So what I heard T.D. Jakes say one time was, you can never thank God for being healthy if you've never been sick. So you can't expect to go through nothing in life and learn things. You just can't. You'll never be able to help anybody or become a better person. It just doesn't work like that. So God allowed this to happen. He allowed this prodigal son to get his money, do what he wanted, and then we'll see where it goes from there. So just like it reminded me of when I was teaching, when I first started teaching, I was miserable. I was absolutely miserable because I went in there thinking, dun, 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 I'm going to save the day. Every little child's going to bow to my every whim. I'm great. Well, no, I got bitten, bruised, kicked, punched, cut up, not just physically, but emotionally that year too. It was my very first year. I was in first grade. I'd never been attacked by such small children before. But anyway, God allowed me to go through all that so I could become a better person, not just as a teacher, but also so that I could get thicker skin. I could grow a backbone. I had no back. I'm still growing it. I'm still growing a backbone, but I had none then. So I couldn't say no to anybody, but it made me better, not only for people outside, but also in the years to come, because I taught for a few more years after that. I went through a lot that last year that I taught, but because I had been through madness that first year, God prepared me for it. So it still wasn't easy, but I was prepared for it. So let's look at Luke 15:13-14. I'm breaking these verses down little by little. A few days later, the younger son gathered together everything that he had and traveled to a distant country, and there he wasted his fortune in reckless and immoral living. Now when he had spent everything, a severe famine occurred in that country. He began to do without and be in need. Good job, prodigal son. So as we can see, God let the prodigal son do whatever he wanted. He had reckless and immoral living. He just did whatever he wanted. He went out, club. I don't know what a Bible club looks like. I don't know what it looks like, but he did reckless and immoral things. I'm just being honest with you. Either way, he did reckless and immoral things. But notice what God was showing me. It says, now when he had spent everything, so not like when he spent like half, not when he spent just a little bit, he spent everything. It was then that God let a famine come into the country and he had nothing. He had nothing. But that was for a reason. He didn't want him to be able to take care. He wanted him to see the consequences of his actions, of trying to take the reins of growing up and the process of growing up. What happens when you try to take those reins and alter God's process for your life? So that blessing that he got of his money and his inheritance, it wasn't a blessing at all. That's what T.D. Jakes, I love this quote. He said, a blessing given too soon is not a blessing at all. It actually works the opposite. So sometimes quite often, God will let us go through things that we think are negative, and in the moment they may look terrible. There's times where I look at him and I'm like, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for this? What do we do? The money, the child, everything's going crazy. but there's a reason that he's letting us go through it. But then the other thing is, there's things that we bring on ourselves. There's storms that we allow to happen within the storm that God's allowing us to go through because we make free will choices that are negative. We try to take it out of God's timing, out of God's hands, because we want what we want. And so the trials that you're going through, whether you cause them or not, just know that it's God's process of getting you to where you need to be, so that when you come out on the other side, you can look back and go, oh, it wasn't easy, but I understand why I went through it. Remember, Romans 8:28 is my favorite verse. We've been watching it all in the show Manifest. Great show. Really great show. The mom always says, Romans 8:28, all things work together for the good of those that love him. And it's true. They may look absolutely chaotic and terrible, but he'll work it so that when you get to your destiny, when you're in the process of becoming that person, you can see why things happened. So what God was telling me to look up was the process of how a pearl was made. And I was like, a pearl? I don't even wear pearls. They're pretty, but it's quite fascinating. I watched a nice Australian lady narrate a National Geographic video on how pearls are made, and not like the costume jewelry either. It's really interesting because you take a mollusk, and it's pretty ugly, an oyster, a clam, somebody with, shell. And within that mollusk, an organism, some type of irritant, gets inside. And it rubs, and it rubs, and it irritates the inside of that shell. It disrupts the natural being of what that oyster or clam, whatever it is. And eventually, a substance called, I don't want to say this wrong, forgive me if I say this wrong, it's called nacre. But the normal name, the other name, the non-scientific name is mother of pearl, and that's my favorite phrase because when something happens, I go, mother of pearl. But it's a substance called mother of pearl, and mother of pearl just keeps getting added and added and added and added onto the irritant until finally, it could be 6 months, it could be 10 years from when that irritant got inside. But eventually, when the process is finished, you have this beautiful pearl. It didn't just happen. Like, the irritant didn't get in there and then bam, the pearl's made. It took time. It's a process. But that oyster didn't, fling its shells back and go, God, I can't do this. I just can't do this. It didn't stop midway. It didn't pause. It allowed that irritant to get in there and create something so precious and beautiful because it went through a process. So moving on, Luke 15:15 through 16. So he went and forced himself on the citizens of one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He would have gladly eaten the carob pods that the pigs were eating, but they couldn't satisfy his hunger, and no one was giving anything to him. Imagine that. You want to puff up your chest and be proud and say, God, I basically know more than you. I want to take things out of your hands. It's going to happen. You're not going to get free handouts. But oddly enough, that's part of God's mercy, because he's trying to make you the best version of you that you can be. At this point, the prodigal son's hit rock bottom in his process, because Jews weren't supposed to be around pigs. They weren't supposed to be eating pigs. Pigs were a no-go. Pigs were filthy. They were unclean. But this man was so desperate that he was willing to eat the pig's food. He didn't even want to eat the pig. He wanted to eat the food because he was just that desperate. So when you try to take control of what God's doing and interrupt his process, he may allow you to sit in the mud with the pigs. Not literally. I mean, it may be literally. I don't know if you're on a farm, but it won't be literally, most likely. But he's trying to show you that he is God and you are not. When you make your bed, you have to lie in it. When you make choices that don't involve God, he's going to allow you to go through things to strip you, to refine you, and not let you live in that pride, in that fear, in that doubt. He's trying to make you the best version of you that you can be. So, moving on. Luke 15:17 through 19. But when he finally came to his senses, He said, how many of my father's hired men have more than enough food while I'm dying of hunger here? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against you and heaven in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Just treat me like one of your hired men. So he was willing to come back. He was willing to come back to his father because he was broken. He allowed God to break him. Now, what I've seen too often when people hit rock bottom, you have one of two choices. You can allow God to break you, gracefully broken. That's why I love that song. You can allow him to gracefully break you, change you, refine you, or you can make a permanent decision about a temporary circumstance. You can just end it all because you've listened to the enemy whisper, look at you, look where you are, look where God's gotten you. He's gone. This is it. This is as good as it's going to get. And to that I say, do not, never listen to the enemy when he tells you that, because God, believe it or not, is with you in the rock bottom. He is there. He is there wherever you go. He is just standing there saying, come to me. Just ask me for help. I am always with. It doesn't matter if you are in church, at home, crying messily on the bathroom floor. It doesn't matter. He's saying, just come to me. I want to change you. I want to work with you, walk with you, talk with you. But he also gives us free will, and sometimes free will causes us to choose the road where we listen to the enemy and end it all. But here in this story, he allowed God to break him, to change him. And he was going to go back to his father and be like, I'm not even worthy to be called your son. I'll just work with those other guys. Because what God was showing me is, how can he use you when you are too proud to bend your knee and submit to him? He can't. He can't use you. If I ask my child to go help somebody, but she's like, whatever, I want to go over here, I can't use her because she's so focused on what she wants to be focused on, what she's doing. I can't use her to help somebody. So he's trying to always make you the best version of you, but it's a process. It doesn't happen like this. He's going to allow you to experience these negative that we see as negative, but they're not. They're just things to refine you and make you better. Jesus was showing me his own life was a process. And granted, he didn't need to be humbled in any way, shape, or form. He was humble. But he still came to earth to experience everything we experience now. He told me, he's like, I couldn't go from cradle to cross. It just doesn't work like that. He was born, and there were things he had to experience in the middle of his life before dying for us on the cross. Because what he was showing me is that if he just was like, well, I know I'm here, I gotta die for these people, let's just get it over with and do it, when I'm 15. Why prolong this? He would have missed so many opportunities to help people, to save people. He couldn't cut it short. He was wholly man, entirely man, but he was entirely God. But in that, he had to trust his Father that he was there to help people, to do what he needed him to do. So he couldn't cut that short. He had to sit and endure, knowing that in the end of his destination, he was going to die for a bunch of people that either chose to accept him or not, but he was going to die. But he still allowed God to use him to heal people, to spend time with people in the process of him being here on earth. You have a destiny. Again, you're not here on purpose, and God will not waste an ounce of the pain that you have been through. He won't. He won't be like, well, I'm sorry you went through that, but tough luck. No, he is going to use every bit of pain for a purpose. The thing is, if you've listened to my mother-in-law's sermon from 2 weeks ago called Emotional Pain and Forgiveness, I think that's what it was called. If you haven't, please do. If you listened, you know that Jesus is just standing there going, take my hand. Give me that pain so I can use you, so I can help you become a better person. Because that's what deliverance and freedom ministries, I think we're calling it now. That's what freedom ministries, it gives you freedom. God takes your pain and leaves you with the testimony from that pain, but you don't have to be in pain anymore. If you just take his hand and walk with him, give him the hurt, the pain, the fear, he can use you. But again, it's a process. You have to sit and trust him within the process. So let's land this plane here. Let's go to the last 4 verses. Luke 15:20 through 24. So he got up and came to his father, but while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion for him, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. I'm going to pause right there. What I love about this is that this father let his son walk through the process. He let his son walk through the process from pride to humility. And even at the end, he didn't do what the people were surrounded by do. He didn't go, sorry, you had your chance, I ain't taking you back. He didn't do that. This father did exactly what Jesus does. We mess up, he lets us go through these things within the process, but when we return to him, he's always there with open arms. He's just waiting for you to say, God, I need you. I can't do this by myself. So it says, and the son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and in your sight. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quickly bring out the best robe for the guest of honor and put it on him. And he gave him a ring for his hand and sandals for his feet. And bring the fattened calf and slaughter it, and let us invite and feast and celebrate. So I'm going to pause right there too. This son, who had been through what I'm guessing he considered hell and back, walked through the process of going from this prideful, arrogant man to this humble servant. He considered himself, he was willing to be a servant. And because he allowed himself to be broken in the process and refined, I don't want to keep saying broken, refined in the process, not only did he not have to return back to be a servant, but he got the best of everything. His dad wanted to give him the best because he trusted enough to go through the process. And after he had that experience of being broken, he was willing to do whatever the father needed him to do. And that's what God's saying. He has the best for you. He has the best. And even though you're in what may look like mud and dark, and it looks like a terrible situation, if you trust him, you cry out to him and ask him for his help, all he wants to do is give you the best and take you to your destination to be the best version of yourself. And the last verse says, for this son of mine was as good as dead and is alive again. He was lost and has been found. So they began to celebrate. And I've always heard this verse, like, okay, yeah, he was out partying, he was doing all his stuff, all his junk, so he could have died. It means that. But what God showed me just the other day was, it says, for this son of mine was as good as dead. His pride would have been his demise. It would have killed him if he continued on that road, refusing to let God help him and change him. It would have killed him. But he is lost and has been found. You can't be found without being lost. So again, the stuff we go through is for a reason. You just have to let God change you and walk through it with you. Invite him. He already knows what you're going through, but invite him, ask him to help you within the process. It's nothing that he hasn't seen or done before. He never sinned, but he's experienced temptation and joy and sadness. He's experienced it all. He knows what we're experiencing. Before I play this video, I felt like I had to mention, I've gone through a process myself. I've gone through many processes, but I didn't always hear God the way I hear him now. I've grew up in church. I knew who God was. I knew that Jesus died for us. I knew there was a devil. I knew there was a Bible. I knew a lot of things, but I didn't know him. I had gotten saved at the age of 5 and about 27 times after that because I really needed to make sure I was saved. You don't have to do that. But I didn't know him. I didn't speak with him. If I get married and I know a little bit about him, my husband, that's great. But if I never speak to him for 20-something years, it's not a relationship. That's just existing. God wanted a relationship with me as he does with you. I was stuck in religion, which is a bunch of rules and this and that and don't do this. And that's what people tell you that God is saying. He gives you guidelines. Granted, yes, every good relationship needs guidelines, but he's not sitting there condemning and this and that. He just wants to talk to you, to hear from you. He wants you to get to know him. So I didn't hear him. I just knew what people told me about him. So as I went to different colleges, I ended up at Southeastern where I met my future family, and they began to teach me how to hear from God. But I'll never forget this. I was thinking about this the other day. I kind of halfway heard from God at this point, but I went to a church one day and the pastor said, I'm going to give you homework. And I'm like, oh, homework. I like homework. I'm just a nerd like that. So anyway, so he said, tomorrow and every day when you wake up, I want you to stop and just sit and just listen for maybe 5 minutes to see if God wants to tell you anything. I'm like, okay, I can do that. So I went home. I had just gotten married. I was in Lakeland. And so I woke up on Monday morning. It was still dark out. It was dead quiet in our apartment. And I sat up. I'm like, okay, the pastor said to listen and stop and hear if God wants to tell you anything. Okay, I'm ready, God. And I went, looking like I was going to fart, looking totally constipated. It was great. I'm sure God had a great laugh, but I didn't hear anything. And if I did, I'm sure it wasn't anything major or life-changing because I don't remember it. But the point is, I had to take that experience and apply it to every day. Because hearing from God is a process. It doesn't just happen like that. I had to go through so many different deliverances and give him my hurt, my fear. I was bogged down by fear. I was afraid of everything. I was afraid of my own shadow. I was afraid to disappoint people. I was afraid to make people mad. I was afraid of everything. I had to give him my fear and my doubt, my intimidation. I had to give him all that in order to be able to hear him more and more. He showed me I was standing in a room surrounded by boxes, just filled with stuff, and he was on the other side. He was always there. He was always in that room with me, but I couldn't see him or hear him because there were so many boxes full of junk and baggage that I had collected throughout my experiences of hurt that people caused, just different things that have happened to me. But as I took his hand, just like I said in her sermon from 2 weeks ago, Emotional Pain and Forgiveness, I beg you, please listen to that. I took his hand and I asked him to heal me from the hurt and the fear and the worry and the doubt, and more those boxes started to go away. He moved them. He got rid of them because I allowed him to, but it was a process. I had to sit in it and trust that he was going to change me, and I'm still going through it. But the thing is, we're going to go through it until we see him in heaven, because life is a process. But are you going to choose to trust him within it or just try to control it yourself? I beg you, please trust him in it. So really quickly, before we close, I want to show you this video that God kept telling me, go look up this video. It really, in all honesty, sums up everything I'm trying to say. It can filter out all my rambling. It'll just show you in one quick video what I've been trying to say about trusting him in the process. So take a look at this video. It explains everything.
For many reasons, because he is an incredible artist. I'm not sure his name, but that was incredible.
The point God was trying to make with that was, my own husband said it this morning. He goes, I just thought he was just doing a bunch of random brush strokes. And that's what it looked like at first. The audience, I'm sure, was sitting there going, why are we even here? What is this? What is this man just doing this? It looked like none of it made sense, that it was just a bunch of purposeless strokes. But not once did the artist question what he was doing, because he always knew what the end of the painting was going to look like. And that's what God's saying to you. I know where you're going. I made you. I know what you're going through. I woke you up this morning. I brought you into this world for a reason. And even though it doesn't make sense, it may not look like anything at this moment, I'm not making this up as I go along. That's what he's saying. He's not going, woke Marissa up. I guess she's just gonna wear this shirt and, just go here. Maybe, possibly, he knows exactly what he's doing. Not once did he question what he was doing. The audience probably did. Most definitely I did. But what's so cool, at the end, it was Jesus. And that's what everything's pointing back to, is just, what is Jesus doing with you? What is he wanting to do with you? And you need to ask him. So if you can get anything out of this video or this sermon at all, just sit with him, seek his face and his voice. When you hear him and you know without a shadow of a doubt that it is him and he's telling you to do something, don't question it. Just allow him to do it. And just trust the process, because God does not make mistakes. So as we close, do you want me to close or you want to? Okay. Just be reminded that what you're going through now is not permanent, and he has a purpose and a plan for everything you're going through.
Much, Alana. What a beautiful way of telling the story of the prodigal son. I just want to say thank you for joining us, and truly don't stop the process. A prodigal son doesn't always have to look like you get up and walk away and you just go out there and do things. Prodigal son is anything that's really separating you from God and God's will, right? So that pride that you have, or that way of, I need to do it my way and don't want to listen to what God says, can actually turn you into a prodigal. Okay? Because it's all about what you want and not about what Jesus wants. Right? And when you stop, and you just stop, bow the knee, and you allow him, you'll be able to come back to him and come to him and learn according to what he says, according to what he wants. So I just want to leave you with that little reminder, and I just want to say, especially to out there on Facebook and YouTube, have a wonderful week. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate you tuning in to House for Healing for the Nations. Have a wonderful evening. Oh, I said evening. I mean day.